Welcome, bonjour. Today we're going to go over our third beginner French class. Whether you attend the class or not, you can follow along with the full class notes posted below in the description. Also, please don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel to help Saint-Esprit make more videos like these. So this is going to be a bit of a long one, but I've added chapters at the bottom so you can jump to the section you want to hear about and you can skip other parts. Also, don't hesitate to come back to this video whenever you'd like. Ok, on y va. In the third French class, we first started with the pronunciation of the French numbers 1 to 10. First, we have the number 1, which you should already know since it's our indefinite article, un. Then we have the number 2, and that's where we start running into interesting pronunciation bits. The number for 2 is deux, spelled D-E-U-X. The X at the end is silent. However, if a word starting with a vowel comes after, we will make a liaison between these two words, and this liaison will make the Z sound, like a zebra. So the number 2 is deux, but two friends is pronounced deux amis. For the number 3, we say trois. We do not pronounce that S in the end unless we have a word starting with a vowel after, and that would be another liaison, like in trois amis, which means 3 friends. For the number 4, we say quatre. We need to remember that in French the letter Q and U together make the sound K, like in English word castle, K. In French, we never pronounce the U that comes after a Q. Then the number 5, we say cinq. We do pronounce that Q in the end, just like a K. However, sometimes we won't pronounce that Q if the word coming after starts with a consonant. I would say that most of the time in real life we will pronounce it though, except for 5 minutes, where we usually say 5 minutes with a silent Q. But I've said it sounding the Q before, so I wouldn't worry too much about this one. The number 6, while it's spelled the same as in English, it's not pronounced the same in French. We say six, like if that X was double S. That X will revert to the Z sound, however, if the word coming after starts with a vowel. But that's the liaison exactly the same as our word for 2, deux. So if we want to say 6 friends, we will say six amis. For the number 7, just imagine the P before the T is not there. It is silent, so we say sept. The number 8 is huit, huit. The number 9 is neuf with an F. That F rarely will be pronounced like a V if followed by some words starting with a vowel. For example, 9 years will be said 9 ans with a V liaison sound. 9 a.m. or 9 p.m. will be pronounced 9 heures with a V sound again. We'll see more about that when we see our lesson on how to tell time. Finally, our number 10, 10, will follow the same rule as our number 6, 6. The X will be pronounced as a double S, but will be pronounced as a Z if there is a liaison with a word starting with a vowel. For example, 10 friends, 10 amis. So let's go over the number 1 through 10 together with an extra liaison example every time it is relevant. 1, 2, 2 amis, 3, 3 amis, 4, 5, 6, 6 amis, 7, 8, 9, 9 heures, 10, 10 amis. Now, with that out of the way, let's jump to our next bit in this lesson. And it is about how we translate it is or it's. We have learned how to say he is, she is, but not it is. We know that to say he is, we say il est. And to say she is, we say elle est. Well, most of the time to translate it is, we will say c'est. We will say c'est. Let's make sure it's written on the screen somewhere, because that can be confusing. So we say c'est. Okay, here are some examples. We will use c'est, for example, with an adjective. To say it's good, we will say c'est bon. To say it's bad, we will say c'est mauvais. Note that bon and mauvais are adjectives that apply most of the time to taste, and we can also use the word bien ou mal as adjectives, but that's more for bigger things like good and evil. I've added thorough explanation in the class notes that you can download below if you want to know more about that particular point. Another example of when we use c'est is when someone asks, who is it? Or what is it? Who is it, in French, is said, qui est? And to say it's John, for example, we will say c'est Jean. What is it, in French, is said, qu'est-ce que c'est? Or if you want to speak fast, qu'est-ce que c'est? And we could answer, for example, it's a cake, which in French will be c'est un gâteau. C'est un gâteau. One final example will be when you want to emphasize something in a sentence. Let's say you want to say, it's corn, it's the most beautiful thing. To say that, you would say, c'est du maïs, c'est la plus belle des choses. I'll explain in a future lesson on the uncountables why we say du maïs and not un maïs, and how we use the superlative the most. So make sure you subscribe so you don't miss these lessons. One last point on c'est is that there is a case where you will use it to translate he is or she is. And that is if you're saying he is or she is a something with a noun. For example, he is a man. While grammatically you can say il est un homme, we will usually say c'est un homme. To say she is an engineer, you can say c'est une ingénieure. When we see how to say professions, you might find that this clashes with a rule where we never use an indefinite article before a profession. You just heard me say c'est une ingénieure using the indefinite article une. While the rule is true, if we use il est or elle est, for example, we would say elle est ingénieure, this rule disappears when we use c'est. I'm mostly saying this if you come back to this video later after we see the professions. For now, just keep that one on the back burner and remember that we can use c'est for a person if we use a noun with an indefinite article to describe them rather than an adjective. This is why you can say both il est français, using the adjective for French, but also c'est un français, using the noun a French as in a French person. Okay, that was a lot to digest, but we're not done. Now, let's get back to some conjugation. We need to learn another very important verb in the French language. If not the most important one, the verb aller, which means to go. You may have spotted that its infinitive ends in er, and therefore that it is a verb of the first group. Well, you're right, but it is irregular, so unfortunately we have to learn it as is. The verb aller in the present goes like this. Je vais, tu vas, il va, nous allons, vous allez, ils vont. Again, je vais, tu vas, il va, nous allons, vous allez, ils vont. To make this interesting, we're going to learn about prepositions as in going to, going in, being from, living in, etc. But before we do that, I want to show you a trick. Just like in English, the verb aller can be used to cheat a future into a sentence without learning any new conjugation. What I mean by that is that in English, you can say, I go to the swimming pool, or I'm going to the swimming pool in the present, but you can also say, I'm going to go to the swimming pool. And it becomes a near or immediate future, something that is about to happen. So by adding to go to the conjugated verb I'm going, you turned it into a near future. Well, in French, it's the same. I can say, je vais à la piscine, which means I'm going to the swimming pool, or I can add the infinitive after my verb, my conjugated verb, which is aller, and it will turn my sentence into a near future. So I'm going to go to the swimming pool is je vais aller à la piscine. This works with any infinitive verb, and you never have to conjugate that infinitive, because the infinitive is the non-conjugated form of the verb. This means that to say, I am going to eat, we say, je vais manger. To say, she is going to speak, we say, elle va parler. Okay, so to sum this up, if you learn the verb aller in the present tense, you actually learn two tenses, the present and the near or immediate future. I think that's pretty sweet, don't you agree? All right. Before we see more examples of sentences to practice together at the end of this video, I want to teach you a little bit about some prepositions of location, like I mentioned before. When we're trying to say that we are going to, living in, or that we are in a country, we need to learn the gender of that country in French. A country can be masculine or feminine, and a small number of countries are plural, like the United States. I'm going to use one example for each, but there are more in the notes that you can download below. So with a masculine country, for example, Canada, Canada in French, we use the preposition au, au. I'm going to Canada is je vais au Canada. With a feminine country, for example, France, France in French, we use the preposition en, en. I'm going to France is je vais en France. With a plural country, for example, the United States, les États-Unis in French, we use the preposition au, ending with an X. So we will make the Z sound for the liaison since this country starts with a vowel. This is why we say, I'm going to the United States, je vais aux États-Unis. Again, je vais aux États-Unis. Now, in the case of a city rather than a country, we will only use one preposition, the preposition à with an accent. Meaning that if we want to say I'm going to Paris, we will say je vais à Paris. Now, to say you are from a country, we will use the same logic. Depending on the gender of that country, we will use a different preposition. With a masculine country, for example, Canada, we use the preposition du, du. I'm from Canada is je suis du Canada. With a feminine country, for example, France, we use the preposition de, de. I'm from France is je suis de France. With a plural country, for example, the United States, we use the preposition des, des. So to say I'm from the United States, we say je suis des États-Unis. And to say you're from a city, same thing as before, only one preposition. But it's the preposition de, de, like feminine countries. Therefore, to say I'm from Paris, we say je suis de Paris. Finally, there's one more set of prepositions I'd like to add to this lesson, and it's about going to or to be at a location that is not a country or a city. I'm talking about any location that is a regular noun, and regular nouns have gender, as we have learned in lesson 1. See, if I tell you a supermarket in French is un supermarché, you will know that supermarket in French is masculine. In English, you simply say at the and the location. In French, it's actually the same, but because our definite article changes, it will create different prepositions. What I mean by that is that in French, you can say à la for at the with a feminine noun, but it's forbidden to say à le or à les. À le becomes au, au, and à les becomes au, au, x with an x in the end. Let me put this into examples so it makes more sense. I'm going to the supermarket would be technically je vais à le supermarché. But because à le is forbidden, it becomes au. We will therefore say je vais au supermarché. Same thing for I'm going to the flea market, which in French is said les puces, meaning the fleas. Because it is a plural noun in French, I'm going to the flea market will be je vais aux puces, with the preposition au with an x replacing the forbidden à les. Alright, I hope this was clear enough. I know this is a lot to process, so don't hesitate to watch this video more than once and even at a lower speed if that helps. Also, if you have any questions, please put them in the comment below and I'll get back to you. All the comments we've received on the previous videos were really heartwarming, so I'd like to thank you all for that too. And finally, remember that these videos will always be there if you need to come back to any old lesson to brush up, so don't hesitate. In the meantime, I will leave you with some examples on the screen covering this whole lesson. I will slowly pronounce them so you can repeat after me. I hope you have a great day. See you on the next one. J'ai 2 amis. C'est un homme. Le gâteau, c'est bon. Je vais aller au supermarché. Nous allons à la piscine. Ils vont manger au restaurant. Ils vont au restaurant. Je suis de France. Je suis en France. Elle est du Canada. Elle est au Canada. Vous êtes à New York. Vous êtes de New York. Nous parlons anglais des États-Unis. Now, for those who are still here, I'm going to pronounce all this again, but with my regular Parisian pronunciation. J'ai 2 amis. C'est un homme. Le gâteau, c'est bon. Je vais aller au supermarché. Nous allons à la piscine. Ils vont manger au restaurant. Ils vont au restaurant. Je suis de France. Je suis en France. Elle est du Canada. Elle est au Canada. Vous êtes à New York. Vous êtes de New York. Nous parlons anglais des États-Unis.